Hi, everybody. We're glad you're here. I'm Mark Duffy from Research for Action. We'll be doing formal introductions a little later, but it is 11:30. Maybe we'll give it, a few more seconds, give it another 30 seconds or something to see if anybody else comes in, but we're excited that you're all here and that we get to share with you today. So, yeah, and there will be a chance, throughout the presentation, please feel free to add questions to the chat. There's a point toward the end where we have a Q&A section, and we'll check the chat and see what questions are coming up. But this is really going to be an informal kind of conversation between myself and three practitioners from the field who will really be sharing their experiences, based on the research study. So I'm excited that you're all here. Hopefully this will be helpful. Just also, I put in the chat the link to the full report that this research is based on. So feel free to go into that link, and hopefully you'll find the full report helpful. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Just again, welcome to this presentation and panel discussion on strategies to support personalized competency-based learning implementation at the district level. We're so glad that you're joining us today, and hope that you find this webinar a helpful resource and an interesting discussion. The findings that we share with you today are available in our report, State Adoption to District Implementation, Approaches and Strategies for Personalized Competency-Based Learning, and again, that's in the chat. The full report focuses both on the state and district level. For this session, we'll be focusing on the district level, but hopefully you'll find the entire report helpful, and again, that's in the link. I also want to acknowledge that this research was made possible because of Research for Action's partnership with KnowledgeWorks and was funded by the Leon Lowenstein Foundation. Okay. So just as kind of a brief overview of the study, I work for an organization called Research for Action. We're a Philadelphia-based education research and evaluation nonprofit organization with about 30 years of experience. We focus just on education policy and practice. And RFA partnered with KnowledgeWorks, as I said, to document and analyze how personalized competency-based learning is taking hold in 4 states: Arizona, Nevada, North Dakota, and South Carolina. And the initial cohort of school districts implementing the work in 3 of those states: Arizona, North Dakota, and South Carolina. Nevada wasn't quite as far along in the work at the point of the research. The research team at KnowledgeWorks put together 3 goals for the study at the outset. The first one was to document approaches and lessons learned from policy adoption and implementation of personalized competency-based learning policies in 4 states. The second was to identify how the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the move toward personalized competency-based learning in each state. And the third was to identify how each state defines and operationalizes its equity commitment within the state's personalized competency-based learning efforts. This research aims to directly support and inform states and districts already utilizing personalized competency-based learning, as well as others considering the effort. The study was informed by an array of qualitative sources from the study states and districts, including document review, policy scans, and interviews with state and district level respondents. The study identified a sample of 2 districts in each of the 3 study states implementing personalized competency-based learning. And in each of the study districts, Research for Action conducted interviews with a total of 4 respondents across the district, school, and classroom levels in the summer and fall of 2021. To inform the research over the life of the project, we also recruited points of contact at the state and district levels to serve on something that we call the Research Advisory Committee, or RAC. The RAC members provided feedback at critical intervals in the study, reviewing research questions and dissemination plans, data collection instruments, and analysis used to develop this report. And we want to thank all the people who took part in the interviews, especially the Research Advisory Committee. Okay. So our agenda for today includes the following activities and discussion topics. First, you'll get to meet our panelists from the 3 study districts. Next, we'll review just some of our findings, and I again encourage you to look at the full report. But we'll look at some of our findings and have a structured discussion with our panelists, focusing on district motivations for adopting personalized competency-based learning, systems change or policy change at the district level, capacity building strategies to support districts and schools in the work, common successes in the work, the influence of COVID-19 on implementation, and resource needs in implementing the work. Then we'll spend some time looking at your questions and responding to those. And then we'll provide some recommendations from the research. And then we'll close things out, and you'll be encouraged to complete the Aurora Institute survey on this workshop. Again, just during the webinar, please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. We'll do our best to get to at least some of those during the question and answer period during the presentation. So why don't we get started just by introducing our presenters and panelists. Again, let me just first introduce myself. My name is Mark Duffy. I'm a senior research associate at Research for Action and the project director on the study. And so I'd ask each of the panelists just to, tell us again a little bit about yourself, how long you've been with your district, the size of your district, what grades your district serves, when your district adopted personalized competency-based learning, and then how you would describe your implementation strategy for the initiative. So I guess going from left to right, why don't we start with Greg?
Yeah, hi, my name is Greg Dobitz. The previous 2 years, I was the personalized learning and instructional coach here at Oaks Public Schools in Oaks, North Dakota. This year, I've taken on the elementary principal job, and I didn't get a chance to update that with Mark, so my apologies. But I've been in Oaks for 18 years. I previously taught as a 4, 5, and 6 math instructor. We are on year 5 of implementing personalized competency-based learning here in Oaks. I guess our strategy has shifted a couple of times through those 5 years. Our first foray into PCBL here in Oaks was not very successful at classroom implementation. So the past 2 years have been very heavy with a focus on classroom implementation after developing our pillars, our own pillars for personalized learning, and since then has gone much better. We are a K-12 district that serves about 500 students in one building.
Great. Eric?
Good afternoon or / morning, depending on where you are. I'm Eric Brooks. I'm an instructional coach at Vista High School, which is one of the 6, soon to be 7 high schools in the Yuma Union High School District. We serve about 11,500 students. Our grades 9 through 12, so we're simply a high school district. Our personalized learning journey started for a considerable amount of time. I've been with the district for approximately 6 years. I was fortunate enough when I was at the Department of Education to also do a lot of work with this district. And so I feel as if I've been a part of the district in a lot of ways since as early as 2009, 2010. So it's an absolutely wonderful district that does amazing work. And our personalized learning journey was not difficult for us to kind of accomplish or to get involved with, because we really do a really great job of involving our teachers and our staff early on. Our teaching and learning team does an amazing job of making sure people are included and making sure people have a voice. And so as long as our staff and faculty have a voice, it's not difficult for them to offer students an opportunity for voice. Now, it's not all roses and daffodils, but for the most part, it really does help us get the work that we need to get accomplished. So.
Angie?
Hello, I'm Angie Wright, and I am Chief Academic Officer in Lexington School District 3. We're a small rural district right outside of Columbia, South Carolina, in a town called Batesburg-Leesville. We have 4 schools in our district and about 2,000 students. So we do serve pre-K through 12th grade. I have been in this district now for 15 years, and I've been in the role that I'm currently serving in for about 10 of those years. We started as a personalized learning district in 2016. Our State Department of Education has an Office of Personalized Learning, and they were beginning some cohort groups for districts to learn about personalized learning, and we just kind of cast the net out there for those who were interested in being part of some of those early cohorts. And then the very next year, we became partners with KnowledgeWorks, and we've worked with the same two consultants since that year, and they have really helped us to try to scale and spread. And we've kind of shifted our model as well, as Greg mentioned, and we've used teacher leaders as well as some very intensive training for our administrative team so that they can get in and facilitate their own PD. But we also still use KnowledgeWorks. Our team is actually visiting our district next week, and we're super excited to have them come down and just be able to continually deepen that learning that we started several years ago.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks again so much for all three panelists being a part of this presentation today. Okay. So we want to start by talking a little bit about what we're learning in terms of district motivations. Why adopt this particular kind of work? And so, it's just really important to understand the motivations that lead districts to adopt this kind of whole school, really very complex effort. And so multiple districts across our study states identified the following motivations. First, 3 districts reported that personalized competency-based learning was something that they already wanted to do and had started to implement through aligned policies and practices prior to implementation or adoption of the effort with KnowledgeWorks. So this work was kind of already happening in some ways in a lot of these districts. Individual teachers, interestingly, often also identified personal alignment with personalized competency-based learning and their prior teaching philosophies and practices. So this really, struck a chord with a lot of the teachers on a personal level that wanted to get involved with this work. At least one district in all 3 states identified personalized competency-based learning as a strategy to help students achieve their high school graduation standards and prepare them for the world after high school. So this is really also about preparation for graduation, college, and career. And then lastly, external site visits and observations were a huge part of the motivation for this work, and were a really very powerful part of district and classroom adoption. Just the opportunity to see this, whether inside or outside the state, was identified as a really central external catalyst for district involvement in the work. There's just nothing that beats actually seeing it happen, in person. And seeing the way students are engaged and so forth, and that was a huge catalyst and motivator for districts to get involved. So I wanted to open this up to the panel and just ask you all to say some more about whether or not these motivations align with your experiences, and maybe were there other motivations as well. So whoever would like to jump in.
I'll jump in and say that this absolutely aligned for us. As I mentioned, our State Department of Education has an Office of Personalized Learning, but we also, with a partnership with our State Department of Education and several other associations around the state, have a profile of the South Carolina graduate, and I know many states have moved in that direction. And so that profile really helps to drive the focus in our district. And we knew, after having studied that profile and digging in and kind of rolling up our sleeves, that personalized competency-based learning was the direction that we were going to need to take if we wanted to accomplish the outcomes that are outlined in the profile. I know many districts are also struggling with how to meet all the different needs, especially coming out of the pandemic and different levels of loss, as some people may refer to it, in terms of learning for kids, and struggling with MTSS and trying to make sure that we are giving everybody what they need. And again, personalized competency-based learning was the direction that we knew we needed to go in order to be able to do that. You have to strengthen the core Tier 1 instruction, and you do that through this pathway.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of what you said, Angie. We had started to innovate in our junior and senior high with scheduling, and that kind of led us to be approached by our State Department of Education about this possibility of working with KnowledgeWorks and adopting personalized competency-based learning. And our staff got together and, you know, through our discussions, we really talked about, hey, this is what is right for all of our learners. And if we truly want to live out our values and reach the potential for all of our learners, then this is something we had to do. And I think Angie brought up another really good point, that we were already in our transition when the pandemic hit, but man, it allowed us to transition very quickly. And I know we'll probably talk about this a little bit more in the next question, I think, but it allowed us to transition really quickly, and it's allowed us to shift gears very quickly with those students that are coming out of the changes in things with that learning loss, like you said. So it's really been an advantage in those situations.
Terrific.
would say-
Yeah, Greg, did you want to hop in? Or,
No problem.
sorry, Eric.
It's okay. Yeah, I was going to say, similar to the other two, our district a number of years ago chose to have all of our students use the same curriculum. And what you do when you accomplish things like that is that you create conversations, or you create the ability for teachers to really have great conversations about how to do things with the curriculum that they have and how to do things in their classroom instruction. And so because of that, our partnership with the Center for the Future of Arizona allowed us to, they kind of put a bug in our ear and said, hey, would you guys consider doing something with KnowledgeWorks? And I know our associate superintendent was one of the first to take a pioneer journey to, I think it's Maryvale, where they really looked at personalized learning in action and kind of came back. And at that particular time, I was serving as the chief academic officer. And she came back and said, this is something we need to do. This is our next step. And it made so much sense because we had various initiatives that we were already a part of and that teachers had bought into and were really implementing and owning. So we had our Ready Now Yuma initiative that was going on, which really helps prepare our students for college, career, and community. We had the fact that all of us use the same learning management system, which is Canvas. And all of those things were kind of working in tandem to get us to the point where personalized learning seemed to be just the appropriate next step for us. And we're really excited about taking the journey.
Great. Okay, thanks for sharing those. So in terms of really thinking about classroom implementation, oftentimes it's easy to forget how critical it is to actually build district systems and policies that support the work. And so there were several common systems level changes or district policy changes that were found across multiple districts that I wanted to highlight. The first was learning progressions and priority standards. In 3 study districts, including both districts in South Carolina, educators were really working on unpacking the state academic standards to identify those priority standards and learning progressions so they can better track students' progress against the standards. And then teacher evaluation was also a systems change that was common. Both districts in Arizona and South Carolina reported revising their teacher evaluation systems to align with personalized competency-based learning. And then in one North Dakota district, they're modifying their evaluation tool to reflect personalized competency-based learning look-fors in the classrooms. And then 2 of the districts are implementing the Marzano evaluation method, which is really seen as being aligned. So really exciting, especially that evaluation piece, that what teachers are being evaluated on aligns with the work, which is so important. And then finally, standards-based grading. All but one of the study districts adopted standards-based grading. And in some cases, this progress had actually begun before implementing personalized competency-based learning, but has since expanded to new grades. So, just really critical for district level players to be thinking about, how do we support this work in the classroom by making sure that our policies align and that we're not sending mixed messages. So I want to, again, turn to the panel and just ask, why would you say that district policy change is important in supporting and implementing personalized competency-based learning? Feel free to jump in.
I'll jump in first this time. I think a lot of times, our policies and procedures can prohibit the work that we want to do, and it can kind of stifle the creativity of our teachers and stifle the creativity of projects that we want to work on. So one of the things I'm really proud of about our district is the fact that our superintendent leadership has all been in our district for a really long time and has worked with a lot of us as teachers and as mentors. And so because of that, they really have an ear to what we need to do as a district and will make and create policies in regards to allowing us to do the things that we need to do. You know, we have a very strong teaching and learning team so that when standards-based grading and all of the other things that are really part of this came forward, there were people who were tasked with the opportunity to help teachers own this work. And so because they help teachers own this work, like for example, our director of educational technology really worked with people in regards to standards-based grading, not only on the logistical pieces of it, but also the theory behind it. Like, why do we live in a world where we would want to change and transition to these sort of things? And a lot of our policies and a lot of things like that that are created are really created by hearing teacher voice and hearing what people have to say about, you know, having a few great pioneers start out. You know, our KnowledgeWorks coach calls it the cultivation of the willing. Having a few great teachers just really start out and kind of try some things and practice. And then we're always really patient. It's not like someone stands on a mountaintop and says, by tomorrow, we will all be doing this. It's oftentimes after a while, we want you to try something, play with it, see if it's something that you're interested in doing, and then we can support you along the way and making sure you get there. So our policies really align with that. We create policy and procedures that make sure that those, it gives people the flexibility to kind of do some things and actually take risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg or Angie, I don't know if you want to jump in with any other thoughts there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll jump in. So I think that systems level change, that support from, you know, the school board, from the superintendent, from the leadership is vital. Both, you know, like thinking monetary wise, it's hard to do, right? Because you have to do so many different things, but then also just people wise, like you need to make sure that your people are supported. And you know, Eric talked about that, like you have to be able to be okay with your learners learning at a different pace and your teachers implementing at a different pace. And we kind of ran into a problem with that. You know, we thought, well, everybody's just going to go at their own pace and we'll get there eventually. But just like in a classroom, your teacher has to set a minimum pace for your class. Otherwise, it's going to take all year to get through the first priority standard. Your administration needs to set a minimum pace for your teachers too, because teachers will revert back to what is comfortable. And exactly what Eric was saying, you have to be okay allowing them to take risks, allowing them to fail a little bit, to get knocked around a little bit, and then get back up and make changes and do what's best for the kids in the room. And to do that, you have to have a lot of patience and you have to have a lot of support. The system level changes, you know, that go along with it, all those things that Mark said are doable things, but you have to have the support of the administration. You have to have the support of the people in your building that will back it to your stakeholders and your community too.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Okay.
I'll be
Angie, you
real-
want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll be real brief. I'll just say they both said that what they shared was so eloquent, but I agree 100% that as leaders, especially at the district level, that we've got to remove some of the barriers that keep teachers from being able to do this work. And sometimes that means giving them permission not to do some of the things that they perceive are mandated, or just removing those mandates. Sometimes you have to give them a little bit of permission to kind of color outside the lines, so to speak, in terms of state regs and policies and procedures. We're very fortunate that our Office of Personalized Learning at the State Department supports some innovation and really tries to work with districts to give us some freedom from some of the things that maybe restrict us. but it's really important as district level leaders to help remove some of those barriers, both for your school leaders as well as the teachers. And I'll just add to the teacher evaluation piece and some of the things that you're already having to do. It becomes so critical as a leader for you to voice how those things are connected to this work for teachers. They get so bogged down in the day-to-day grind of their work that they're not always connecting those dots themselves. And so sometimes just simply articulating it and letting them understand how it is helping you meet or get to the vision and the shared goals that you have in your district or your school is really important. And I don't think you can over communicate those things so that teachers can buy in and be part of this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Okay. So much of this work that's just so critical is building the capacity to do the work, because this is tricky work. In order for this level of instructional change to take place, educators need both knowledge of the approach and structures to support them in the work. And so we identified some common strategies to build this capacity across multiple districts. First was sharing the learning from convenings. So collaborative meetings focused on professional development networking were certainly the most common form of capacity building and professional development. So school and district administrators and faculty often would attend convenings and then report back to their peers on what they learned. So, kind of a teach the teacher model in some ways, or train the trainer. And then providing opportunities for internal and external observations, which we also talked about, is just a really powerful tool. Just was also was very common, and that was identified as particularly effective as a way to get teachers and administrators, excited about the work and to learn about the work. So in some cases, study districts hosted opportunities for teachers from within their district, as well as having other districts come and observe their classrooms. And then educators also engage in external site visits in districts in other states. And I think part of what's so important there is also giving teachers an opportunity to debrief and to sit and talk with their peers about what they saw and ask questions of the person who was teaching, and really make that an interactive professional development opportunity. And then recruiting teacher leaders was a common tool that was used. Several districts used varying strategies to level teachers through a train the trainer approach by recruiting a group of teachers to help lead the work and disseminate the information. Offering problems of practice and study sessions was also identified. There were 2 districts that reported utilizing a book study approach to orient educators to personalized competency-based learning. In one district, groups of principals and assistant principals met on a monthly basis to discuss personalized learning and build their institutional or instructional leadership for the effort. And then another sessions were focused on problems of practice, and really including implementing personalized competency-based learning and providing opportunities for that kind of purpose of struggle to work on those problems and come up with shared solutions. Developing human and material resources, also really important in terms of human resources. One model was the employment of an instructional coach, and that model is represented on the call today. Really to provide that support and feedback for classroom implementation, and that was seen as very effective, just to be able to provide that customized feedback on a one-to-one basis with teachers in what can be really challenging work. Similarly, another district was creating actually a project manager position for personalized competency-based learning to support activities like data collection that can be really important. And then material resources, just having those instructional resources like a resource bank of personal learning materials, or shared training modules developed by KnowledgeWorks, just so teachers aren't having to recreate the wheel in terms of coming up with their lesson plans. And then really leveraging those existing meeting structures. You don't have to recreate the wheel here. If you have meeting structures like a common planning time, regular curriculum meetings, leverage those in order to build capacity, as opposed to coming up with maybe a whole new convening or something. Use those things that already exist in order to support your teachers in learning how to do this work. So I actually really want to call on our panelists at this point to talk some more about each of these. So each of the districts represented here are highlighted for one of their promising practices. There are lots of promising practices in these districts. But I call on Yuma first to kind of talk about the really, I thought, interesting district design team and campus design team model that they used for building this work and communicating about it.
All right. So from a lot of our work is from the individualized teacher to their professional learning community, to their campus, and then up to district. So it's a very clear line of communication and a very clear line of people who are involved. And so we're encouraged and rewarded for working on our PLC work. I'm sorry, our personalized learning work. Like I said, we're encouraged, we're rewarded, we're incentivized to really participate in it because we know it benefits our students. And so kind of back to the policy and procedure question earlier, there are things that our leadership has put in place to make sure that we own the work and to make sure that we're really comfortable and enjoying the work that we're doing. There are a lot of opportunities in every meeting, every time we gather, to celebrate the successes, to spend time talking about what we're doing, to spend time learning from each other. When a principal, for example, at a particular school does something exceptionally well, or even shares his or her struggles, there's an opportunity in either a principal's meeting or in a larger scale meeting at the district level for them to talk about that work and for people to kind of hear and kind of learn from that person. So we have, we all kind of went, similar to other districts, we went to a convening that was held, which kind of netted us and kind of vetted us in this work. And so from that convening, we at our own district spent a lot of time talking together, talking about the work. We as individuals every month even reflect on our progress. So we have goals that we've set aside for personalized learning. And a lot of our goals that are around personalized learning, again, we get the opportunity every month to sit and reflect on those goals. And we provide that reflection to our principal, who then spends time providing those reflections to district. And so it really is a comprehensive system where we all spend time kind of knowing what each other's doing. I think it's very rare, but I think it's amazing how, if you ask any of our superintendents or any of our leadership team, our teaching and learning team, they can tell you jot and tittle what's going on a lot of times in individual classrooms, just because that work is constantly talked about, celebrated, and people get an opportunity to visit and see it and to kind of make comment on it and kind of all support each other in that work. Our campus design teams, we've recently went to a system by which we have launch teams. And in our Arizona work with our launch teams, we have, each launch team has obviously the principal, a number of, two instructional coaches, and then some teacher leaders who've really been doing this work. And that team does a number of things to make sure that we're trying to spread and scale that work throughout our campuses. So we highlight teachers when they're doing it, and then we celebrate the fact that it's being done.
Great. And then Greg has been serving as an instructional coach in Oaks for quite a while. So I'd love for you to describe some more about your work as an instructional coach.
Yeah, so before we started our transition to personalized competency-based learning, we did not have an instructional coach for our staff. And so part of the work that we saw in front of us, we knew the instructional changes that would need to take place, and to do that and put all that on just the teachers and the two admin that we have, elementary and high school, junior high principal, would be too much. So our district invested in hiring a personalized learning / instructional coach. And in that role, I was not limited to just instructional strategies one-on-one, but I was able to plan our professional learning. And we, over the course of the past 3 years, have really changed how we do professional learning. It's very personalized. Just like we ask our teachers to do for their classroom, we are personalizing the learning that they're getting to lead that change in their classroom. And that's probably one of the biggest, most positive things that we've seen. So a lot of our teachers use, choice boards and learning menus for their students. So we're doing the same thing with them. We're offering, problems of practice, book studies. We're offering, learning walks and all of that stuff. Our teachers are able to choose and to make those decisions for what they want and need in their classroom. Our district has seen a great deal of progress in the area of classroom implementation in the past 2 years. And in the past 2 years, I have been able to be full-time as a personalized learning and instructional coach. And I think those two things go hand in hand.
Great. And then Angie, can you tell us a little bit about the teacher leader model that you've had in your district?
Sure. I mentioned in the introduction that we are a small district. We have 4 schools. And so as we've tried to kind of scale and spread this work, from the outset, we had teacher leaders from each building that attended some of the cohort sessions. And then that evolved into, once we started working with KnowledgeWorks, we were able to kind of expand because KnowledgeWorks was coming on site and working with us prior to COVID and providing on-site professional development. So we were able to include more folks. And then when COVID did hit, we had a captive audience. We had teachers at home, as all of you did too, and they were being paid. And so we utilized that opportunity for them because our capacity to work with kids at that time was somewhat limited. With everything happening so quickly, for them to kind of jump into the work of building out learning progressions for each grade level and each content. And that work has just continued to evolve. We have some very detailed learning progressions that go all the way down to K4, but that are in very student-friendly and parent-friendly terminology so that kids and teachers and families know exactly what kids are supposed to know and be able to do in each quarter of each school year. And that has really been a good source of work for our teachers. And then in that, to kind of complement for what they need individually as teachers, Greg mentioned the personalized piece for them. The teacher leaders in each school kind of have their own little area of innovation that they've been working on, and they are sharing those stories and successes within and among one another, and that is continuing to kind of help us scale and spread the work. And so we're just really proud that teachers want to do the work, and when you kind of put it out there to them that this is going to be a co-accountability for this work, how can we create these structures and processes together? They really want to be a voice at the table. And if you give them the right support, they can take it and run with it.
Great. Okay. So we want to share some common successes that we found in our research. First, just really exciting is that increased student engagement piece. We saw that in nearly all the districts, that students were just more engaged in the classroom. In some cases, we heard about better behaved students, in part just because they had more personalized, quote unquote, relationships with their teachers. There was greater student agency, more voice and choice in the classroom. And both in terms of the ways that they demonstrate their learning, and that just really increased across the study districts. And then there was more of a sense of student ownership in their learning, which I think is really exciting. Students were better aware of how they were performing against the standards. And beyond that, they understood what they needed to learn to make progress. And they could really articulate their learning goals in clear and specific ways. And that isn't something that you typically see students doing. And so I think, those are some really exciting successes. And just want to, again, turn to the panel and ask, along with these, were there any other successes that you would point to from your schools and districts that you want to highlight for our participants?
Yeah, I'll jump real quick. One of the great things that we've had in Oaks here is a great partnership through our cohort, and we've also been able to get to schools outside of our cohort and do some observations. And it just seems like every time we're able to go somewhere else and take our classroom teachers with us, it's like you jump in, you come back and you jump in your car and you mash down the accelerator, and our teachers are flying for the next couple of weeks. And there's always that inevitable slow down moment. So if you can evenly space those site visits, and you can see progress, because when a teacher, and I've heard all of our teachers say it, right? Oh, I can do that. Now that they've seen it, that, oh, I can do that moment comes very quickly, because you can explain it to them and you can say, I've seen teachers do this, but until they see it with their own eyes, that's been a game changer for us here in Oaks.
I'll jump in and add to what Greg said. In our district, we've experienced something very similar. We've been able to go to Maryville, that I think was mentioned earlier, in Ohio, and then also to Kettle Moraine in Wisconsin, who they both are out there really leading the way with some of this work. But it really does increase teacher engagement, and their innovative ideas that they come back with as a result of having seen practices in other places has just blown me away. Even this school year, we have a team that did a summer visit, and they didn't have students in session while they were visiting, but they brought back such innovative ideas, and they've completely revamped how they're doing intervention in the 3rd grade at our elementary school as a result, and getting tremendous success with students. And so I'm not only seeing engagement with teachers, but also engagement with students as a result of some of that. And I think it just helps shift the culture in your schools and across your district. And there's this mindset that, hey, this work is really important, it's a value, and it's getting us results. And I think that once that, as Jim Collins would say, once that flywheel starts turning, your momentum just continues to gather. And if you can keep that rolling, you can really see some.
Great. Okay.
I'll echo both of those sentiments. We were able to do, our district was able to also go to Kettle Moraine, and then I mentioned earlier the Maryville. And the wonderful thing about teachers going places and learning things, and they learned a lot. We learned a lot at our through our Arizona Personalized Learning Network. So there's 4 different districts who are involved with that. And then I know that there have been times between convenings and between sessions where our teachers will work with their teachers and things like that. And it just happens so regularly that we learn a number of different things. Part of the reason why so many of our students, or so many of our teachers right now, are using standard-based grading is because several of our math teachers really got involved with it. And then we talked to some math teachers in another district from our AZ, Arizona Personalized Learning Network, that's hosted by KnowledgeWorks. By talking to those teachers and kind of learning from them and teaching them how to work with the standards-based grading in a math class, it really started to spread. And so now the evidence you see, and I get to see it even more personally now in on a campus, is that you see teachers who were reticent now trying to do some things. It could be as simple as, I watched a social studies teacher who's been teaching for almost 35 to 40 years the other day, give students choice in which essay questions they wanted to answer on an upcoming exam. And so it's little things like that where you know it's spreading because you see people doing it and you see people having the opportunity to really get involved. And they're learning from not only outside the 4 walls of their campus, but they're also learning inside the 4 walls of their campus, which is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, great. Okay. So of course, all of this work has been happening within the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, that significantly impacted the whole world, including teaching and learning. And so the interaction between the pandemic and personalized competency-based learning really changed education in study districts in several common ways. So first there was really broad consensus that, and I think it was mentioned, that personalized competency-based learning really helped implementing schools and districts adapt more quickly during the pandemic. Participation in the effort prepared educators for the changes that were needed with remote instruction and help them to pivot and provide personalized instruction to meet the individual needs of students. So that was very clear. Second, state level officials actually who we talked to highlighted how the pandemic sparked interest in personalized competency-based learning due to the student-centered approach in addressing learning needs and environments created by the pandemic. So there's really that mindset shift in educators to reconsider, how to best serve students. And then lastly, the pandemic really did at the same time, slow implementation, professional development, and scaling. So it wasn't, in some ways, the pandemic helped to highlight the value of this work, but at the same time, it did slow things down. For instance, the need to keep students socially distanced and to monitor COVID spread through contact tracing limited the ability of districts to allow students to meet in small groups and switch classrooms, and they mastered new standards. So in some ways, it really highlighted the value of the work. In other ways, it slowed the progress of the work. So those were things that we were picking up on. I don't know if just real briefly, because we only have 15 minutes left, if there are any other ways that you were really seeing COVID-19 influence the work in your districts, just real briefly, because I do want to keep going.
I'll say very briefly that I think that one thing, even though it may have slowed PD to some extent, it also gave us some acceleration because we learned through Zoom and Google Meet and all the different tools that are out there that we could convene teachers in groups virtually to do some of this work. And that's exactly what we did and we continue to do. And even in formats like this, being able to share across districts and across the United States even, I think it has really shown us that we don't always have to do PD the way we had always done it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll be real brief. I think one of the things that's really taught us is that it's taught us that students don't only learn from when they're sitting in front of us as teachers. And so we've really developed our Canvas pages. We've really developed ways in which we can make sure that if a student isn't here, obviously during the pandemic, there were obvious reasons why students weren't there, but now it could be any number of reasons, but a student doesn't have to give up their learning if they don't attend school. There are ways and access to the information that are accessible and important for our students so that when they do return, so if I miss Monday and I return on Tuesday, I haven't missed a beat because I have all access to the education and the learning that took place. And that's really important for our teachers.
Yeah, great. Okay. So of course, this work really takes a lot of resources, and we've talked about a lot of resources already that have been effective. The value of observations has been touched upon time and again, but there were also additional resources that were mentioned as being needed, and the first one was just time. Of course, concentrated time to focus on personalized competency-based learning is just so critical to the work, and it needs to happen on a daily basis. It needs to happen long-term because, although we're seeing some really promising practices, it's important to recognize this is hard work that needs more preparation time than traditional instruction. And, as Greg was saying, I think it was Greg, it requires people to be able to really take baby steps and to try and to fail and to try again. So, a little bit different kind of model here. So it just takes time to create, time for observations, time for conversations, times to debrief. So it is a time-consuming kind of thing. And then really, we heard that, there's a need for some concrete examples for like a toolbox of instructional resources so teachers don't have to recreate the wheel. Certainly, teachers want to be able to customize things to fit their classroom, but at the same time, it's good to have a place to start so that, when they're adopting and implementing personalized competency-based learning, there are some tangible strategies that teachers can build off of through, existing curricular materials and things like that. So I wonder if there are other, again, briefly, any resources in addition to these that you think are really critical for teachers to have in order to implement this work.
My comment's not really a resource. I think it's really about a mindset shift, and it's it's got to be that growth mindset. I mentioned it earlier, and you kind of alluded to it again, Mark, but your students have to go through a mindset shift. Your teachers have to go through a mindset shift. Your community has to go through a mindset shift. And the sooner you can start instructing all of those pieces, because it's a learned practice too, the better. And I think that that's kind of that first step. If you were going to make that first step tomorrow, really start diving into the instruction of a growth mindset with your learners.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, I do want to give a chance to just kind of briefly look in the chat, and we do have some questions that have come up. The first thing in the chat is just, again, the link to the report and then the presentation slides and the research report. Okay. Somebody shared these strategies are great to hear about because they align with efforts in our state. So that's good to hear. What types of things are you gathering data on? I'm not sure. I guess, I could, see if the panelists want to share, are there any particular types of data? I mean, we were finding at Research for Action that even though a lot of districts have been at this for a while, it still seemed to be early days because it does take time. It still seemed like kind of districts were in the early phases of this work, but want to share or want to provide an opportunity for the panelists to just talk about the types of data that they're gathering about this work, if any.
I'll share. We are, in addition to having been part of this research, partnering through our connection with KnowledgeWorks with the Raleigh Institute at Furman University, and they've been doing some surveying of not only our teachers but our students, and eventually I think there's going to be some parent surveys possibly too, but just trying to help us to see what the level of implementation is actually like at the ground level, as opposed to just what we might perceive it to be as school and district leaders. And then also, particularly with our teachers, what do they need? What, in terms of our next steps, what do they need? And of course, you mentioned a minute ago, time. They need more time for the work and the capacity for them to really understand how it's connected to other things that we might be working on within our district.
Yeah. Anything else, Greg or Eric, any kind of data that you're collecting about implementation or maybe even early outcomes?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we've really started to focus on is engagement of our learners. We're using a Wellington engagement index that KnowledgeWorks hooked us up with. It's really super simple. It takes very little time, and we're getting great results from that. And not like always positive results, right? We're getting actionable data that our teachers are using to make changes to classroom instruction.
Great. Eric, anything else around data collection?
I think a lot of the data collection we do is the evidence-based data so when you say these things are happening, we have to provide evidence of that. And so a lot of simple things like classroom photos, a lot of things like taking videos of the work actually taking place, and then also sharing that work with our Arizona Personalized Learning Network and seeing some of the other things that are being done there. So it's a lot of the, like I said, providing evidence. And like I said, each month, I alluded to earlier, each month, all of us as employees, as instructional employees, have to provide ways in which we're progressing and ways in which we're working toward our goals. And a lot of that is evidence that we're providing to our leaders.
Since education in America has changed.
Great. Okay. Great. Okay. So we didn't have actually too many questions in the chat. And now there you go. I did want to spend just a little bit of time talking about the recommendations in the report before we close out. So it's just really important to set clear goals for the work. just clear goals are so critical for district implementation. And district effort response identified actually a lack of a shared set of short-term outcomes and long-term goals for the effort that being set, at the outset of the work. It's just really critical, so you know where you're going, and then you can figure out how to get there. We've talked about, really including teachers in the work, and including all educators at all levels in district design teams. I think is a good idea. In some cases, district design teams initially didn't include all levels of district stakeholders, and that can create a disconnect. So really, try to figure out ways in your whatever kind of governance structure you have in your district to include folks at all levels. We've talked about the importance of developing district policy and practice that supports the work and removes barriers. That's really critical. And we've talked about time, allowing time for teacher orientation and implementation on a daily basis and in the long term. We've talked about the importance and value of classroom observations and reflection time that goes along with that. Offering both human and material resources to support the work, and really determining a strategy for dissemination of information that fits existing district structures. And then the one thing that we haven't touched on too much, but that I did want to make sure to make mention of, is the importance of really defining equity and how personalized competency-based learning will support equitable student outcomes. The majority of districts in the study really emphasized that this effort could address issues of equity by helping to meet the needs of each individual student. While focusing on the needs of every individual student certainly speaks to equity, student outcomes will often vary by student subgroup and reflect inequitable opportunities for traditionally underserved student populations. And to that end, just want to emphasize, districts should really consider identifying student achievement gaps and focus their efforts on equity by addressing the needs of student subgroups by experiencing those gaps. And so, we're just about at time. And I want to at least give a couple minutes for folks to fill out the survey at the end that Aurora has put together for us. But just want to, let if any of the panelists have just anything to add quickly about any lessons that you would share about the work before we close out. Anything you haven't already mentioned? No?
I'll just mention, it's hard work, it's taxing, but at the end of the day, it's worth it. And it will reinvigorate your most seasoned, hardened, whatever the next adjective is or adverb is, teachers. It will get them reinvigorated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Only thing I would add is that I just think our teaching and learning team at our district office has done such a phenomenal job in a variety of ways. And this hour doesn't allow you to capture it all, but the portrait of a graduate work, the learning cycles work, all of those things that KnowledgeWorks and the Center for the Future of Arizona have kind of been with us hand in hand and helping us accomplish really lets us share that with our teachers and create better experiences for our students.
I'll add one last thing, and that's just that you can't eat the elephant all at one time. So it's okay to start with some small baby steps, and it's okay. I can tell you that 7 years in, we're still taking small baby steps because it's really hard for teachers to make those kinds of big shifts all in one swoop. And so, again, going back to the flywheel, just get the flywheel moving and keep it moving, and you'll see the progress, as Greg and Eric have both already stated so well.
Great. Well, I will let you go into the chat and find the link to the survey. I want to thank the panelists so much for taking the time to be a part of this session. Hopefully it looks like from the chat that a lot of participants really found this helpful, and I just am very grateful for your time and for your wonderful insights. So thanks to everybody for coming. Hope this was helpful. Go in the chat, fill out the survey and read the report. Hope to see you all again next year in person. I understand that the Institute Symposium will be in person next year. So that's all.